ready to go. I just welcome the public to this meeting this morning of the Audit Committee, and inform those watching that in the public area they can use mobile devices through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. 3G and 4G should not be used, and no recording or photographs are to be taken. If members are content, we'll start with working through the agenda. Content? So the first item is apologies. I don't think we have any apologies other than John's on his way. He's delayed in traffic. So the next item on the agenda then is declaration of members' interest, and I remind members that they're obliged to declare any relevant finance or other interests before taking part in relevant committee proceedings. Does any member have any interest to declare?
Thank you, Chair. Just to declare, as the business comes on, I also sit on the Public Accounts Committee and Finance Committee, so a little bit of overlap with today's business.
Okay, thank you. So, draft minutes. We want to consider the draft minutes of the meeting on the 25th of June 25. Refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of June 25, which are at page 6 of the meeting pack. And I just have to ask members if they are content with the draft minutes. Content? You want me to sign them now?
Yes, please.
Just anywhere here. Thank you. So, any matters arising from the minutes? Nope. Okay, thank you. Right, committee item 5 in the agenda then is the committee consideration of annual reports and accounts of NIAO, NIPSO and NIAC. I refer members to the following documents, which are available for information. The Secretariat briefing paper at page 13. NIAO Annual Report and Accounts for 24-25 is at page 14. The NIPSO Annual Report and Accounts for 24-25 are at page 135, and the NIAC Annual Reports and Accounts for 24-25 are at page 219. So I just have to remind members that the committee does not have a role in the strategic or operational oversight of the three bodies. The 24-25 accounts contained in the reports will be helpful in supporting the committee's scrutiny of the budget proposals of each organisation today. So if members are content to note the annual report and the accounts for 24-25 for the three bodies, and if I can have permission from the committee that the budget sessions will be recorded in Hansard. Are we content? Thank you. So, item 6 then on the agenda is the evidence session on budget 26 to 2930 of the NIAO. And refer members to the following documents: the Secretariat briefing paper at page 345, the NIAO budget submission 26 to 2930, it's at page 348. And correspondence from the Committee for Finance on the Department of Finance budget gathering process is at page 359. So if I could just welcome the delegation from the Audit Office. And they're represented this morning by Dorinnia, Carville, the CNAG, Rodney Allen, Chief Operations Officer, Brian O'Neill, Director of Corporate Services. You're very welcome this morning, but look forward to hearing what you have to tell us. So if you want to carry on and brief the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you all and to present our budget proposals for the next 3 to 4 year period. Obviously, we have provided you with a written brief, which is in your packs, but if you don't mind, I just wanted to maybe set out the context of our request, reflecting on what we've achieved over the previous year and our ambitions for the future. And of course, we'll be happy to take any questions then that you may have. We've been on quite a journey as an audit office since we were last in front of you, and you will appreciate when we were here in the past, we talked to you about the difficult environment that we were operating in with regard to recruitment and retention, very much facing significant sectoral recruitment challenges, and those were impacting on our delivery as an office. So with your continued support, we have invested significant time, resources and effort in raising the profile of the Audit Office and the work that we do. We have been working directly with universities and colleges, widening our engagement and providing information and opportunities to work with us, and also creating new and innovative roles within the Audit Office. And I'm pleased to report to the committee that this has seen great success over the past year, and we now almost have a full complement of staff now within the office, which will really pay dividends for us going forward. We have, over the past year, since we've last been with you as well, seen a real increased interest in the work of our office, which is really positive, and something that we continue to focus on with a wider programme of comms and engagement. Our core focus, members, does remain on delivering our statutory financial audit work, which is around 70% of the work of the office. And just to put that into context, every year we are auditing over 150 sets of financial statements across the public sector. That is providing assurance to the Assembly on over £30 billion of public money. We also continue to prioritise servicing the Public Accounts Committee, and that starts with ensuring that we have sufficient public reports to inform their scheduled work programme. So since 23-24 we have published 38 public reports, 9 of which have been selected by the PAC for inquiries to date. And we're also dealing with ad hoc inquiries that arise from that committee as well. We have seen our direct contact with MLAs increase over the period, responding to queries and assisting them as requested. And we have also been requested and attended the DFI committee to give evidence, and also the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee at Westminster to speak on behalf of the fiscal framework for Northern Ireland in that inquiry. Our reports are routinely highlighted in the Assembly Chamber, which we welcome, and recent surveys that have been conducted independently of members have evidenced increased satisfaction in our work, and we have received increased scores from our external quality reviewer as to improvements in the quality of our work. So that said, members, we can't stand still. I'm not here saying that we are the finished product. We have high standards to both maintain and to build upon. So we come today seeking a budget which really we require to deliver on our corporate plan objectives, to continue developing as an organisation, to continue investing in our staff, to drive that high quality financial and performance audits, and ultimately to help us drive improvements in public spending and in public services. So thank you, members. That's a high level context. I'm going to pass to Rodney just for a little more detail then. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorinnia. Good morning, Chairman and members. I'll take just a couple more minutes if I may. Chairman, my letter to you of the 8th of September summarised our financial requests with a more detailed document attached, which is in the pack for members this morning. So in summary, we're asking the committee for your support for a net resource budget increases in the region of 6%, 5% and 3% in each of the 3 planning years through until 28-29. Capital, we have a very small capital budget, £40,000 typically, and we're proposing small increases over the 4-year capital planning budget up to £50,000 per annum. Before I outline the main reasons, I just thought for a quick reminder how we spend the existing budget that you've given us. Around 70% goes on direct costs to our staff, payroll costs essentially, that we employ. Approximately 14% of that budget then goes on contractual arrangements with the private sector for delivering audits on our behalf in partnership with us, and the remaining funds are on the very small administrative costs of running the Northern Ireland Audit Office. So members, pages 6 to 8 of our document contains a detail around why we are asking you for an increase in our budget. In these opening comments, I really want to focus on two main areas of expenditure that make up 84% of that budget. Firstly, in terms of those direct staff costs, we have a significant increase in 26-27, which is attributed to our full-time equivalent numbers finally at the level that we need. Something Dorinnia has referenced to you and something we've talked to the committee about at length in the past, so it's really good news. It's slightly higher than where we would have asked the committee for support previously, because we have the additional staffing resources associated to the audit of the Department for the Economy and the disclaimed audit opinion, which is attached and will attach for a few years ahead. So you're seeing that in the ask in front of you today. We've also included an inflationary uplift, and that's in line with the advice given by the Department of Finance to the wider public sector. And then in the subsequent 2 staff years, you'll see that costs are essentially increased for inflation. Secondly, we have a fairly significant increase in our contracted commitments with those private sector partner firms in 27-28. Because the existing contracts come up for procurement at a point next year, and then we have the full impact of the estimated new costs in that particular year. There has been considerable movement in market rates, and past experience suggests that we will have significantly increased costs compared to when those audits were originally contracted back in 2021. So in summary, members, the request equates to £11.9 million, £12.5 million and £12.9 million over the 3 years for a net resource budget. And if you approve that, that will enable us to deliver the independent and objective assurance over what are fairly significant amounts now of public money that are being spent across Northern Ireland. So in summary, our proposal aims to strike a careful balance, if I may, between audit delivery, quality, managing risks, and of course the employee well-being in our organisation in the most efficient manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Just I have a couple of questions, and then I'll ask the other committee members if there are any questions. I note that depreciation decreases by 18%, 11% and 6% for each year of the proposed budget. Could you briefly explain to the committee what is driving that reduction?
I can take that one, Chair. We get our building valued every year by professionals in land and property services. So we get that undertaken as part of our preparation of our annual report on accounts. So as we've now been in our refurbished buildings this past 3 years, since August 2022, the capital spend is reduced, and accordingly the resultant depreciation is reduced as well. So those figures that we have projected are our best estimate of what the depreciation will be over the next 3 years, and that'll be clarified by Land and Property Services when they come in to do their valuation of our building at the 31st of March every year.
Thank you very much. The second question is, while the capital budget forms a small part of your overall costs, can I ask, do you expect to fully utilise this year's 40k capital budget? And could you take us through the basis for a 12.5% increase in 26-27, a 0% increase in 27-28, and an 11% increase in 28-29?
I maybe come in first, Chairman. Thank you for that question. The first part, in terms of fully utilising it, we hope to fully utilise it. There is a degree of uncertainty around that because we haven't pinned down, it's difficult to pin down exactly what we want to use that budget for. It's very modest, just at around £40,000, but it enables us to look at new and efficient ways to keep that, I mean, you gave us an excellent building a few years back, to keep it in the form and fashion that it's in. We're also very conscious of things that we can do on net zero, and I'll maybe hand over to Brian in a second to give you a sense of how we anticipate that capital expenditure increasing year on year. So can't hand on heart say to you that we will definitely utilise it all, but we will do our very best.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll open to the rest of the committee. Diane?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming to speak to this. I'm really pleased to hear that you're up to the staff complement that you had bid for, and just to go back a couple of times over the past year, whenever you were here and you were bidding for that, you obviously had the plan of what you needed because the increased demand, for the work and to keep up the quality. And I know that throughout, the previous year, you had bid for it, we'd approved it, and you had underspent. So just given that it's increased, for 26-27, I just wonder if you could remind us how much was actually underspent whenever you still had the vacancies in the previous years.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Quite significantly. So last in 24-25, we ended up giving back, and I'll look to Brian and others to keep me right, around about 9% of our budget. But you'll recall we were very clear to the committee we needed your support and to do that, and that we would surrender, and we would surrender as early as possible so that the rest of the system could use those finances. So it was in the region of about 9% was our underspend. This year's a very different position because there was a lot of lag in terms of filling those posts. We weren't dealing with the full year costs. Now this year we're dealing with the full year costs. So we have an internal KPI in our business plan of bringing our budget in, modest budget, within 2%. And at the moment we're just about on target, so we won't be surrendering anywhere near what we've put into the system in recent years. It's a very different position and we're delighted to be in it. And you give you a wee sense there of our FTEs just on page 8. We put a wee table in there because again that's the sort of support the committee has given us just to give you a clear understanding of where we have finally got to. And I'm delighted there are even people in the gallery with us today that are some of those new faces in very important positions within the audit office.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember different times you being here and going through all the different challenges, the different recruitment paces, and it is really, really hard to recruit professionals in the current climate. So it's really good to see that. And I know from the work that you do across other committees and the queries that people they're very aware of your profile, the place that the status that you have, and are looking for things from a number of MLAs. And I don't just see it here, maybe I'm missing it, or maybe it was in your annual report last year, just an indication. I remember there being like a headline figure of the savings generated by the NAAO in terms of public spend. I can't remember how many hundreds of millions that it actually was, just to sort of put it into perspective, what we're spending on running your organisation versus the quantified saving of it. Was that the annual report, or where did I see that?
Yeah, so I'll maybe kick us off and then defer. Yes, it was in our annual report, and we have a long history, Diane, of what we call hard quantifiable savings impacts, where the work of the office and the recommendations that go into the wider system deliver hard savings to the public purse. So over a long timeline we can show a trend and it averages out at somewhere traditionally, and this is over probably like a 20-year timeline, somewhere about 3 to 1, 4 to 1. Now it is spiky. There are some years when it has been considerably higher than that, and some years where it has been less. But if looked at over a long period of time, we're well and truly wiping our face, so to speak.
Absolutely. I think that's just really important that we have those numbers as well, because we're looking at the budget here and looking for say just that return on investment, and the numbers are huge in terms of
numbers are very big in that, and we've built in some very, very important efficiency measures as well. So we haven't just been glib and expected that you would give us everything. We have tried to be as efficient as we possibly can. It's limited in where we can do it, but we have built it in. But you're quite right, it's those big recommendations that can go in ultimately indeed through Public Accounts Committee that can make real savings and improvements for the public purse.
And you'll also notice, Diane, in our annual reporting accounts, the quantitative impacts that are there as well. And over the years, Rodney's highlighted, they have amounted to substantial amounts. Some years have been in the region of multiple tens of millions. So it is there's a spike in what we can do. So, but we do report on it where we can.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Diane. Like you had indicated.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I would echo Diane's comments. It's good to see the recruitment has been a success since you were last in with us. Sort of linked to that, the contracting out costs, and that does just seem to be an ever-rising trajectory. I mean, I suppose on a very general level, to what extent has your recruitment impacted that? Should we not be seeing a reduction in those if you've got your internal staffing levels right?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So essentially the internal staffing levels that we've got to are enabling us to do that 75% of the financial audit workload that sits still within the audit office. You'll remember we spoke separately to the committee last year that we have been taking a real strategic look at the contracting out costs because, you know, I drew your attention to it, and quite rightly you've asked us on it. The market has moved very, very significantly, and we've been doing quite a bit of work in that. You'll appreciate it's a bit commercially sensitive, so I mean, we're more than happy to talk to the committee about it. But if we were doing so, it'd be helpful to be enclosed if we want some more detail around that. But we're looking very closely at that at present. There are real benefits in working with partnership with the private sector. This goes way back, you will know, to 2001 when Lord Sharman did his report on the National Audit Office and advocated for the 25% of NAO and indeed Northern Ireland Audit Office business to be with the private sector to reap the benefits and benchmark and look at the efficiencies from working in conjunction with them. The world has changed over that time. You know, professional standards and auditors have increased. We believe we've got a very efficient, modern audit methodology within the office, so we're looking very closely at what is the best way to deliver that within the audit office and try and perhaps reduce that 25%. Other audit agencies have been in a similar position. Wales, for instance, a number of years back, Audit Wales took it all in-house, so they no longer have any of their work contracted with the private sector. And the National Audit Office, we know from consultations with them, are in a similar position to ourselves, indeed probably just a little bit further ahead of the considerations that we're giving to this. So what I can do is give you and the committee plenty of assurance that it's a very live strategic and operational issue for us in the office. There are challenges if we were to bring more of that work in-house in terms of managing the peaks and the troughs, because it would predominantly be people working in financial audit, and you would almost say, well, if we're doing that work to certain timetables as they are at present, that would be very demanding, which is fine, and we can recruit for that, but at other times then we might have staff who are not, there's no work available for them, so there's a conundrum there that we're just trying to work through.
I mean, essentially, if I'm hearing right, that the contracting out is going to stay in some form. It is necessary to deliver your work.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, as Rodney has said. You know, we're looking at it from both a cost perspective and a timetable perspective to try and deliver all of our financial audits within the timetables laid down in statute or agreed with audited bodies for the ultimate accountability and transparency to the Assembly. That said, the bid that it is a live issue, it's something we're working on, but the bid that we've got in front of you today reflects our current contractual commitments. And we typically contract with the market on a 3-year basis with the opportunity of extension. So what we've got in front of you is an as-is position, our current contractual arrangements, but something we're working on for a longer term, and maybe want to have another conversation with you in more depth and enclosed in the future.
If one extra, just with permission, Chair, just to check on that, in terms of the budget ask, because this is an as-is ask, you're confident these figures do cover the rising cost? There's not likely to be cost rises that you'll be hit with from your contracted out services, or are they this largely fixed?
We have estimated what we think the market rates will be, but until we go to procurement and in the months ahead, Nick, only then will we know. Hopefully our estimates are reasonable, but we might find ourselves have to put the cards on the table in a position where we have to come back to you and say the market has moved beyond even where we anticipated it would be, and that segues right back into the conversation we've just been having about what the future should look like.
Thanks, Nick. John, you'd indicated?
Yeah, it's the same theme, the contracted out costs. Thanks for the information. Apologies for my lateness due to traffic, by the way. I gave the colleague a quick call on the way here. Explaining that, the contracted out cost increases forecast for 27, 28 and 28, 29, just to further clarify, is that purely related to expected increase in the cost of those services? And then secondly, I'll do the two questions at once. If this does go ahead as planned with those increases, will that result in an increase in the number of audits done? And is there any forecast at this stage of what that increase in the number of audits might be?
Again, I'll kick off, Chairman. Thank you, John. The first point, the increase in costs in those 2 years, as you're quite right, it is solely to do with our anticipated additional costs of the existing contracts. So it's solely that. Your second point, I guess the simple answer is no, there'll be no additional audits done. At the moment, that said, at the moment, and we did reference this briefly in the paper, there is one new audit which will come to the Audit Office under legislation in the period ahead. Not a particularly big audit, but it is a new one which we're not asking for additional resources for, so it's another one of our efficiency measures. That's a slightly tangential, but the key point is that the additional costs are solely to do the existing work, no additional financial audit work.
Therefore, Chair, with your permission, an extra question. I therefore suggest that we shouldn't expect, and I think I know the answer to this, but we'll get clarification anyway, that any increase in the number of audits requests that are expected does not necessarily immediately mean a request for increased funding. Some of these will be managed with resources that you have.
Yes, we will do our best, but if it happened that there were particularly significant audits coming on stream, we'd probably have to have a different conversation with you, but yes, that's one of the efficiency measures we try to take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Gemma, you had indicated?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming in and presenting to us. Nick and John have covered most of my questions on the contract and outwork, but in terms of your actual staff and the retention recruitment, what steps have you taken to ensure that that you'll be able to recruit and retain the staff, given the issues that we've had in the past with recruitment and retention?
Thank you, Gemma. Well, first of all, really delighted to have, and I can't emphasise this enough, really delighted, and I talked to the committee before and one of your party colleagues in particular about our training programme, and it's really, really important that we maintain our training programme for graduates and higher level apprentices in the period ahead. So we have built in steps. We've estimated attrition, so we still expect some people to leave us, but our rate of leaving has dropped significantly. The market really has changed out there. But people will leave. In tandem with that, to be honest, we do have a succession planning challenge in the office, because we have people like me who are maybe 1 in 5 of our staff who are of a certain age, and I don't want to be ageist. You and me are good friends, John. So I'm not being frivolous, but the point is that we have to plan for that. That's really important in the years ahead. So we will still continue to see a good bit of change. Our package, our T's and C's, constantly looking, it's not just about payroll, it's about providing that excellent and looking at people's well-being within our organisation. You know, we invest in our people, we strive for more investors and people. We do. I think we've got an excellent package, but they're very talented people, and we do want to retain as many of them as we possibly can. I had another thought in my head there, but it's just gone out. I'm going to defer. Dorinnia once said.
Yeah, the other thing that we have been doing, as I say, we really have been looking at the training offering that, because when we were struggling to recruit from the external market, you know, we really did think about growing our own, if pardon the expression, but so we have we take in graduate trainee accountants, which we'll continue to do. We've been really successful over the past couple of years with our higher level apprenticeship programme, so that is bringing young people in straight from school. During the year we have expanded that offering across the region. We started that programme working exclusively with the Belfast Metropolitan College, and we're now out into wider regional colleges as well to try and spread our offering as well across Northern Ireland, and that has been really useful. We have started a programme with Queen's where we have seen 2 master's students come into us for a 3-month period as well, and we have actually seen that play out in them then seeking full-time employment with us maybe, or going back to their classmates and telling them about the experience that they'd had with the Audit Office. We have actually had our first higher level apprentice go right through from 17 right through to qualified chartered accountant now in that period. So really successful, really important for us to be that training organisation and to continue to invest in that in all levels, because it's not just about the training programme, it's about the in-house experience, the in-house coaching and learning that they get from the other staff members as well. The other thing as well is even on our attrition rate, and certainly in the past 3 years, so often when we have been losing members of staff, we've been losing them to elsewhere in the public sector. And there's a bit of good in that as well. We have been a very successful training organisation. We train high quality individuals, and in some respects, selfishly, you don't want to lose them from our organisation. But I don't mind as much if they're going elsewhere into the public sector and promoting that good accountability, good governance, as well. So that has been where we lose our staff to in the main. We have invested really heavily in an employee people programme as well, so really targeting, we've got that lovely office space that you've been to, but really targeting the health, the well-being, work-life balance of staff as well, and trying to facilitate that where we can, but still with a high expectation of quality audit work as well. It's still it still is hopefully a very rewarding place to work, and that's what we continue to work really hard and have invested in some specialist posts as well to support those programmes as well, and support a diverse training and skill set across the office that's not just about audit either.
Yeah. Two points, because you give me nice thinking time there. Gemma, Dorinnia touched exactly on the point I was thinking of. Really proud of the fact that we have our very first higher level apprentice. So whilst I'm talking to you about succession planning, it's wonderful to see at the other end we have a young person in their early 20s who joined us from school and is now a fully qualified accountant. And that's exactly the sort of talent that we want to grow in the organisation. I think it's tremendous, something we've been hungering for some time, and there are others coming in the pipeline behind. And Dorinnia's point there at the very end, we can often be majoring because most of the office is made up of those people that are doing frontline audit and financial auditing and performance auditing. But we shouldn't lose sight the business is changing and things are evolving. We have specialists in IT audit, we have specialists in data analytics, we have specialists in communications, we have a head of people and organisational development, we have a head of corporate services, a head of corporate affairs. These are other posts that we've brought into the business. Very talented people, but you're right back to the start of your question. It's about keeping those people motivated to do what we want to do in public audit and to make a difference in our organisation, and hopefully that will inspire them to stay with the audit office, but we will have some attrition.
Emma, did you want to come back in?
Thank you very much. Just to say, I think you have sold it really well there, and you seem to have done a lot of work. So I do congratulate you on that, because not a lot of organisations would take that on board, that you do need, you need your professionals, but you do need your work-life balance as well. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so that's really the end of the briefing, and thank you very much indeed for coming along this morning and giving us the briefing. And just on behalf of the committee, once again, place on record our appreciation for the important work that you do on behalf of the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you.
Okay, members, just are we content then with the NIAO's budget proposals, subject to receiving the views of the Department of Finance and the Public Accounts Committee? We content? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to the next item of business, which is the evidence session on Budget 26, 29, 30 of NIPSO, and refer members to the following documents. The Secretariat briefing paper at page 376, and NIPSO budget submission 2025 to 2029-30 at page 380. Have we got a delegation? Good morning. A privilege again to welcome Margaret Kelly, NIPSO Ombudsman, Sean Martin, the Deputy Ombudsman, and Michael McClean, Finance and Corporate Service Manager. if I could just invite you then to start your briefing. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few introductory words in addition to the budget paper. So there are just a few matters that I wanted to take the opportunity to bring to your attention. And the first one is the ongoing and significant increase in the number of complaints. And committee will know that we indicated to you last year that we thought our complaints would come in around 1,250 and perhaps even rise as far as 1,300, and you will know we exceeded this with 1,333 complaints coming through the door and an additional 334 represented. But I would advise committee that since that time, in the current year, we have seen a 30% increase of complaints coming through the door, and that has almost been on a weekly basis, certainly a monthly basis. So we are seeing no drop off whatsoever in the number of complaints coming through. And we estimate that in this current year we're in, we'll see somewhere between 1,600 and 1,700 complaints, with an additional around 380 represented. That does create a stretch across the teams in the office. And while I hope it indicates a confidence in the public in bringing the complaints to us, it is without doubt also a reflection of the pressure on all of our public services. If that trend continues, we would expect the office to be reaching 2,000 complaints by about 2027, 28, and that would be a quadrupling from 2016. So we continue to monitor our processes and our approaches to absorb and address this level of complaint. And as we indicated in the paper, this includes trying to settle as many cases as possible at our stage 2 investigation, which is the shorter 10-week investigation, and manage the numbers that are going through to that stage 3 52-week investigation. But obviously we have to maintain our quality and our quality insurance, and we have to make sure that those serious complex cases that require that level of investigation get it, because that is why the public come to us. Last time I presented to committee, I did also draw your attention to the increased complexity and seriousness of the cases that we were seeing, and I have to say that very much continues to be the case. And there are just a number of examples that I would just provide to committee at the moment on that. So we have seen quite a number of cases where the downgrading of health referrals from GPs when they're going into trusts has resulted in late cancer diagnosis. We've seen quite a number of cases of a failure to identify sepsis, and a number of cases of the impact of not responding thoroughly to people who are experiencing acute mental health episodes. Quite a significant case of a child who had both autism and was non-verbal, and his undiagnosed dental pain left to him missing several years off school, and in fact he was left for 2 years with an undiagnosed dental abscess, and his behaviour really deteriorated, and no one actually thought to look for the reason behind that in terms of what was causing it. And his mother described him as having lost a significant part of his childhood. He actually missed a full 2 years as a failure to diagnose that. And also then I have had occasion to share a number of my reports with the professional bodies, and in particular one on the inappropriate use of restraint on someone with a mental health issue. And further, we've had a number of reports where we have investigated the regulators and their undertaking of their role and a failure to do that properly. So the complexity of those cases continues to come through, and it's really important that we have the resource to address that. In terms of complaint standards, we've continued to implement the statutory complaints process, and I know a number of the members were there when we launched the health and social care one. We've now moved to all central government departments and their 100 ALBs. We're working with the head of the civil service and the permanent secretaries to get that in place. I would expect that to be launched in early 2026. and then to be effective from late summer to autumn 26. And it is my intention to have the complaint standards programme for all the sectors fully launched when I complete my term in summer 27. So we will be moving on then to housing and then to education. I hope the committee will have seen that we recently launched a new investigation into the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, and in fact we've had a series of meetings with the housing spokespeople from each of the parties to get their understanding of some of the issues. But this was as a result of a substantial increase in the number of housing complaints that were being brought to the office, and in fact over the last 3 years we have seen a 72% increase in housing complaints to the office, with most focused on the housing executive. So the focus of our investigation is repairs responsiveness. It'll look particularly at damp and mould. It will look at adaptations and delays and the standards in temporary accommodation. And we will, of course, keep committee updated as we go through that. In terms of our LGS function, committee will note that LGS complaints do have a tendency to fluctuate and will often be, on average, somewhere between 30 to 50 allegations in any given year. In the year to date, we've received 46, which is higher at this point than the average. And I'm sure, as committee is aware, given that these allegations are against an individual councillor, we have worked really hard to ensure they're dealt with in a timely manner, because we do understand the stress that causes. And I have provided committee in my paper with the targets and the case profile, and I'm pleased to say that the case profile on those has not got any older and has continued to be good. In terms of just our budget, if committee will allow, I, like many other public bodies, NIPSO has seen significant budgetary pressure. Many of those are inescapable. Our staff are 82% of our budget. And obviously we need to respond to that. And other inescapable costs are our independent professional advice, which is our cases get more complex, we do have to use, and then our energy and IT costs. Just to bring to committee's attention, you will see that we've indicated a 10% increase in our budget, and this was calculated against the budget figure that committee approved for us last year. But you are probably aware that government increased employers' national insurance to 15%, and as a result, NIPSO, along with other public bodies, were given an additional amount in the June monitoring round to cover that. That was £100,000. So in effect, our budget last year ended up at 5050k rather than the 4950 committee gave to us or approved for us. So we've used the original figure to calculate the increase we've asked for, which is just over 10%, and DOF have used the figure including the national insurance, which brings the figure down to 8.1%, but I just wanted to draw that to your attention. The majority, as set out in the paper, is staff progression of 82,000, budgeting for a cost of living rise of 127,000, and a request for some further posts of 164,000. I am mindful that committee have been very supportive of our work, and I'm also mindful of where our public sector finances are. So I just thought I would explain to committee what those posts are as part of your consideration. So the first post is a lead officer post at stage 1 of our process. So that's where those 1,300 or 1,700 complaints come through the door. And it's to increase the level of supervision for staff who are making those decisions at speed, and also to ensure that they move more efficiently through our process. The further 2 posts are focused at stage 3, which is the further investigation stage. So the first one is an administrative post that is primarily focused on compliance. It will do the work of following up with public bodies who have had a final report to ensure that not only have they undertaken what we've asked of them, but they have actually provided us with the evidence of that. And that approach will free up investigator time who currently have that role, and it'll also make sure that it is done more efficiently, and hopefully that will allow for an increased number of investigations and reports. And the second role at stage 3 is to provide additional supervision. I am sure you understand that us getting those reports absolutely right, covering the detail of them and making sure that everything is right, is particularly important. And it is complex decision making at that stage in our process. So that will allow for more sign off at draft report level and hopefully speed that up a little bit. The sign off of those draft reports, of which there was over 100 last year, currently sits with our Director of Investigations, who holds both that Stage 3 maladministration and LGS investigation. And the sheer volume combined with the complexity can cause a delay in the process. So that is us trying to move that along. And I ask committee to give that their consideration. Just to bring one further thing to your attention before I close, which is a slight typo in our paper that we've sent to you in terms of staff turnover. So in 24-25, the turnover figure, which is on page 12, should actually read 18.1%. And my apologies for that. And I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions committee might have. And thank you for your ongoing interest and support in the work, which we very much appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I have a few questions, Margaret, if I could put to you. In your paper, you state that you anticipate a small underspend this financial year due to delays in recruitment and implementation of the pay and grading exercise. What do you anticipate the level of underspend might be?
So at the moment, I think, given the steps we've taken in terms of our recruitment plans, if anybody's been watching, we've been out quite a lot recently to fill those posts that have become vacant. So we've obviously done a timeline on when we expect those posts to be filled and what the budgetary effect. So on the basis of what we currently know, we're thinking about 100,000 is probably where we are, give or take. And we have quite a lot of uncertain expenditure, and that's based on not exceeding any other budget lines, but just on salaries. I think we're thinking somewhere around 100,000.
Thanks for that. And I note that you're not requesting a capital budget for the full period of the budget. Is this realistic?
I think in terms of the capital budget, we've thought quite a lot about what we have historically spent capital on and whether we intend to do any of that work across the 3-year period. So we obviously requested capital for refurbishment of the building which we're in, and we don't intend any planned work on the building, haven't done that full refurbishment. The other thing that we had asked for capital for was our case handling system, and we'd spent a couple of 100,000 probably in total over a number of years of capital in developing that case handling system. Our costs in case handling system are now revenue, their licences, haven't developed it. We don't anticipate with our level of investment in that we will change that case handling system over the 3-year period. It's something that I think we will have to think about in terms of when the contract currently expires, whether it's still meeting our needs and whether there are other alternatives on the market. But having been there when that case handling system was implemented, it is a very significant, not only just in terms of cost, but actually in terms of our time to shift all that data and get the reporting functionality out of the system. So I say, in terms of our looking forward, we don't anticipate any capital spend in terms of our projection. So we're thinking it is realistic, I say, because otherwise we'd just be putting a figure in the budget without any real knowledge of what we would be using it for.
Thanks, Sean. Diane?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here. And I just think, Margaret and your team, that there's been a lot of high-profile stuff coming out of the office. It's so important, and I think that it's no surprise to see there's the increase in people reaching out to you with complaints, because you clearly are doing a fantastic job, and everybody's seeing that coming through. So whenever people are feeling particularly frustrated with the system, that it's just a testament to the profile that you have of professionalism, that people are looking to go there. But you had mentioned in a previous session about, was it something like half of your complaints were all to do with health? I was just wondering, is that still the same trend, or is your increase in workload tending to be more health, just to get an idea of the proportion of those?
So I'm going to have a quick look at the annual report and accounts. Broadly speaking, the percentage that is health has remained broadly the same. So the number of health complaints have gone up, because our numbers have gone up overall, but they've stayed broadly the same percentage.
Over the years they have varied slightly, but usually they fall between 40 and 50%, say sometimes 42, sometimes it's 46, but they have stayed in that 40% bracket for a period of time. We are actually doing quite a bit of digging into our data at the minute to look for variations because of the increase, to see if there's a particular sector that is driving that increase. Our analysis to date hasn't pointed to a particular sector being the issue. Margaret has alluded to housing going up, and I think that is the case. But health has always been the highest and remains the highest area of our work.
So I've just checked for you because we're just working on the Ombudsman report as well. So it's at 43%, which is broadly where it's been. So it's not going down. So we're still getting those increasing complaints, but neither is it the reason for that total overall increase, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then in terms of that, like some of the you gave a couple of examples there, and we saw some of them out in the public domain. Like there's some very tragic cases, and I'm sure very difficult for your staff to be dealing with those coming through. But in terms of those, whenever you go out with that, what's the process for feeding back? And like, are you seeing improvements coming out of that, or are you seeing those same serious tragic things recurring? It's just kind of what's the measure as to when you do that and it goes back into the system, because we had the audit office in before, and I'm very clear in terms of that. The report goes out, Public Accounts Committee, you're tracking the recommendations. I just wondered what the process was with yours in terms of that.
So we do track our recommendations, and obviously health is a great big system. So sometimes we're picking up in one bit and going, we see this and this, and often the trust will say, well, that's an individual ward, or that's been an individual service. So we sometimes see improvements across, but in truth, we also see recurrent issues of complaint. So I have a case digest on sepsis, on identifying sepsis, because we've seen that as a theme. So we've started to pull some reports together that's saying, here are the trends. But getting significant shift in health. We get shift in terms of individuals, and we get shift in terms of some of those themes, but we are part of, for me, a shift, a cultural and systemic shift that has to come. So I think I couldn't say to you, health will always put into place our recommendations, but we do not always see that right across the board. And you will know as well as I do that health trusts operate in many respects quite individually. So where we do a report for one health trust, other trusts may not necessarily pick that up. The one report that I'm about to issue that I would say we have seen system shift is, so we did a report into the communication with people on waiting lists, and that was really significant. People were on waiting lists for years, and actually we called it forgotten because the vast majority of people said that's how they felt. I'm about to issue the follow-up report on that. I'm about to publish it, and we've seen real shift at a system level in how people are being communicated with, and that has been very positive. But is there more work to do on that, Diane? There absolutely is. I couldn't say otherwise.
I'll look forward to seeing that follow-up report, because it's just ultimately that's what you want to be seeing is the output of the work. And you're saying that your piece on the actual complaints process, did you say 2027?
Yeah. So we have now introduced it in health right across health and social care, including all the family practitioner services, so the GPs and the dentists, as well as all the trusts, and that is now in place. So we will monitor that, and we've done lots of resources to support organisations, but we should have every public sector body in that by summer 27. We're just working on the government departments and the ALBs, so that is our next step.
No, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. John, you're next.
Yeah, I'm going to move away a bit, if I may, Chair, from the sort of bare statistics and the facts and figures and pounds and pence that are in the report, to something you said there around investigating regulators. And I'll relate this to the resource implications as well. Are there occasions then where you're investigating a complaint about a service provider, you then as a result of that find a problem with the regulator? and then that increases the level and detail of the investigation you're doing, and therefore bound to have resource implications for you. And if we can stretch the question out a bit more, how could you forecast that?
So if I start set the context, so as a government system, there are lots of regulators, right from local councils who have a lot of regulatory powers at the local level, right through to NIEA, and there are other people with regulatory roles that you wouldn't think about. A report that we did into the Department of Economy around their role at a point in time in regulating insolvency practitioners. So there's lots of regulatory activity across, I say, local government, central government. So at times when we have looked at their systems and processes, we have made recommendations for improvement and we have seen failings. Now, our work in that area has to some extent largely been complaint driven. So we are thinking about a particular aspect of regulation as a possible own initiative investigation to look at it more systemically. But I say where we have looked at some of the regulators and how they fulfil their statutory obligations and whether they follow their policies and procedures, we have found that there have been a failure to follow those procedures, and we have made recommendations for improvement. And I say it's not one specific regulator, it's right across a whole range of regulatory activities. And I say that those are captured in our broader numbers. You know, we don't pull those out as a sector because, say, they're spread right across government, local government, and even, you know, say, things that you don't know exist. Another one that comes to mind where we have had a number of complaints over the years, the Health and Safety Executive for Northern Ireland, we have had complaints about how they've conducted their regulatory activity. So, say, there is a whole range of regulators, and we do get complaints right across that broad range.
And that's where the complex, when I said you things, we are getting more complex. So when we get a complaint about a regulator, so that one that was about how the civil service regulated insolvency practitioners, that was hugely complex, took some time to do. And to be fair, I think there are lessons in that maybe we could have done a slightly better job of drawing out right across the system. So while that was about how they dealt with insolvency regulation, actually the underlying theme is about when you have a generalist service that has specific regulatory responsibilities, how do you ensure that you have enough specialists that understand that to ensure the regulations in place? And I suppose, to be honest, John, we take that as part of the ongoing part and parcel of our work.
Would there be occasions where a report or complaint about a service provider leads you to the regulator because something has been regulated properly and that led to the gap or fault in service provision?
Probably less so, really.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, for us to enter into the process, there has to be a complaint against the public organisation for us to begin. Now, we do have some discretion, but to be fair to a public body, we usually expect them to have had the opportunity to respond to the issues themselves, because they may well accept they have got things wrong. Which is
bound to be resource implications to that then if you're being led somewhere else.
Absolutely.
In the middle of a report.
Yes.
And that is part, like, that has become part and parcel of our work, which is part of why when we're looking at, like, I suppose the other difficulty is we do need to focus on, so I think as Ombudsman, my term completes in summer 27. I think by that point the office will be looking at 2,000 complaints. That is really a sizable number. So we are also partly looking at our processes, so how do we put things in place to try and make sure we are responding efficiently and effectively, and I suppose in terms of those posts that I'm saying to committee, like, actually that would be really helpful for us. That is about us trying to ensure, because we can't just keep coming asking for more and more and more investigation staff. We also have to make sure that the how we're doing it is proportionate and effective, and I think that's part of why the focus of what I've asked for hasn't actually been for additional investigators. It's been for things to try and make sure that we are moving them through our system and we are being as proportionate as possible. I mean, there is I think any number, as you will know with how things are at the minute, there's any number of OIs I could do, there's any number of investigations, but we do have to have some way of prioritising. And even in terms of the housing own initiative, I mean, that really was driven by seeing that real increase in complaints, seeing some really significant housing complaints, particularly around antisocial behaviour, the impact that it had and a failure to deal with that, not simply in the housing executive, but across housing associations. So, you know, it is a balance for us around how we make those judgments and priorities.
Yep, thank you.
The one area, John, where we do see that extension of scope is particularly health and social care, where you have movement between GP, hospital, maybe into A&E, into inpatient, and then out to care home. And sometimes the patient is complaining about their journey, so you actually can have one investigation can be looking at the role of 3 or 4 bodies.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, Nick.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And I think the rise in the number of complaints, largely makes your case, I think, around the need for increased budget, although notwithstanding what you've said around your own internal efficiencies, and that is significant. I just wanted to pick up on the pay and grading review. When you last presented to us around that was a big feature of the budget ask, was to deliver that. Now that is in place, still looking at potential 17% staff turnover. So, I mean, has that had the impact you'd hoped? And I think how can we avoid the risk that we're needing to revisit whether actually your staffing costs are appropriate resource if you're going to be competitive in that market and be able to retain staff?
In preparation for coming to the committee, I have looked at who we have lost over the period and the projected, and I think projecting on the basis of 5 months turnover, it's always a little bit. It could be massively under, it could be massively over as we project out, but just slightly over half of the posts that we've lost this year have been investigators. So again, now obviously some of those were in the very early part of the year, and where some of them may have been before the introduction of the pay and grading review, but there are others recruiting the same skills as us, and I don't think we could come back to this committee and ask for the increase that to match their salaries. So I think for us it is some of the wider benefits of working for us, not just salary, that we need to highlight in our recruitment and trying to retain. As part of the move in pay and grading, people move to the bottom of their scales, so all of our staff now, bar a couple, are actually on the bottom of their scale, so they now have progression within NIPSO. So we're hoping most staff will have another 3 years of progression, if not 4. So we're hoping that will help us retain. Margaret, in some of the submissions to committees in the past, has highlighted that probably the age profile of our workforce has changed to being more early career people. So we do have very capable people who get really, really good experience with us, and I think it is getting a bit of new blood, and energy and enthusiasm is a good thing, but I think the levels of turnover we experienced can be disruptive, and I don't know what will happen. We're still hopeful. We're not saying this hasn't worked. It's really early days, but I think we hope we've pitched it right.
I think the other thing we are seeing is, so ombuds offices across the UK have had turnover in staff, and we've seen quite a number of them locate hubs in Belfast now, which of course is good for Belfast, but maybe not quite so good for us. So there are some additional opportunities, but I'm hoping we pitched this right.
Yeah, okay. And Chair, if I could just ask another question with your permission.
Yes, if it could be.
Yeah,
succinct.
I'll keep it succinct. So in terms of that, you're saying that you're confident you have done all that you can in terms of the staff retention piece, but ultimately, if we want to run a robust, complaint handling process, you need to.
I think we've done all that we can in terms of that pay and grading. I actually do think that pay and grading is right. I think it's in the right spot. There is always things you can do around culture and support, and we continue to do that. But like that, in any organisation, that's an ongoing piece. So I would just say that.
Thank you. Gemma, if you okay? Okay. Listen, I'm going to ask a very quick, we're racing the clock at the moment, but a very quick question. It's just outside the scope of budget, but we've touched on some of the cases that you investigate, and some of them must be very harrowing and very disturbing. Do you have sort of processes in place to protect the well-being of investigators who have to deal with these disturbing cases?
Yeah, Alan, we do, and you're absolutely right in terms of your description. We have done some work. Our colleague Ombudsman and the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman have done a lot of work with their staff, because the proportion of their workload that is health is over 80%. So they're dealing with these day in, day out. To say we have that broader spread, but
trauma informed and trauma, and I mean, we obviously have employee assistance, but we've had a programme looking at trauma informed work, and we've had PHSO colleagues come over and deliver a number of workshops for staff, and that is part of that ongoing, you know, somebody to supervise and oversee and know those traumatic cases.
And there is some stuff in our processes to allow, if you have been dealing with particular, for people to take a wee bit of time out. They're not expected to be straight back on the phone, particularly in those front end call handling, when somebody is explaining their story, that there's an allowance. One of the things that we brought in was a call recording system for those front end calls. For all the investigators actually are on call recording, but we have built in an allowance for them to be able to step back and indicate that they need to take a wee bit of time. But Margaret's right, we have an employee assistance programme that staff can avail of as well. It is the central government procured employee assistance programme, but in addition to that, we've done that additional work too.
And we try to balance. I do see of those further investigation reports, I see every single one of those, so none of those goes out unless I've seen it. I've seen what the complainant said, I've seen what the public body said, and I've read the full investigation. And some of them are really harrowing, and it's always that balance for us between that empathy for an individual who's had a really difficult and hard time, that balance in terms of our findings, that they're right, and also supporting the employees.
Look, I'm sorry I took you outside the scope of the budget,
but
I thought it was
not at
an
all.
important question to ask, and it's quite a reassuring answer. So thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning, and again, just place on record our appreciation of the work that you do on behalf of the public. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, members just have to ask if you're content with NIPSO's budget proposal, subject to receiving the views of the Department of Finance. We're content? Okay, thank you. Moving then to the next item of business, item 8 on the agenda, evidence session on budget 26 to 2930 by NIAC. Refer members to the following documents in the table pack, the Secretariat briefing paper at page 3, and the NIAC budget submission at page 7. So we're just waiting on the delegation. Good morning. On behalf of the committee, I'd just like to welcome a familiar face in Leslie Hogg, Chief Executive Clerk of the Assembly, and Paula McClintock, Head of Finance. So if I could invite you, if you're prepared and ready, to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I would like to thank the committee for the important work that it does in carrying out its scrutiny of the Assembly Commission's budget. So before I turn to the detail of the budget, it might be helpful to note that the Assembly Commission is unlike any other body in the Assembly. It's a corporate body, not a committee, with a legal requirement to provide the Assembly with the property, staff and services to support its work. The Assembly Commission also has a legal requirement to meet all costs associated with members by way of salaries, pensions, allowances, office and staffing costs. As such, much of the Assembly Commission's budget is predetermined. The Assembly itself does not have a legal personality, and therefore it's the Assembly Commission that has the legal ability to appoint staff and create contracts for services and other functions to support the Assembly. I've provided the committee with a detailed paper setting out the Assembly Commission's budget requirements for the next 3 years for Resource Dale and the next 4 years for Capital Dale. And in addition to the budgets for Resource and Capital DEL, the Assembly Commission continues to require budget provision to support the work of the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee. Those costs are funded directly by Treasury and are therefore ring-fenced and reported separately. I have, however, included them in our submission for transparency and information purposes only. I will now work through the categories of income and expenditure and will seek to highlight the most salient points, outlining where appropriate key differences between the years. So I start with income. As with previous years, the only thing to highlight is that substantially all of the income that the Assembly Commission receives arises from the recovery of ministerial salaries. And the recovery relates only to the additional salary payable to ministers over and above that they receive as a member, along with associated employer costs. A small amount of residual income is generated from contributions received towards the cost of running the Knowledge Exchange seminar programme. So I now move on to members' costs. As the committee will be aware, previously all expenditure associated with members was payable under the provisions of the Assembly Members' Salaries and Expenses Determination Northern Ireland 2016 as amended. So salaries continue to be provided under Part 1 of this determination. However, allowances are now payable under the Assembly Members' Office and Staffing Costs and Allowances Determination Northern Ireland 2025. And these determinations are the basis on which members are paid and provided with the necessary resources to carry out their functions as members. So if I now move on to members' salaries. So it's important to note that members' salaries have not been reviewed since 2016. In the budget, there's a slight increase each year due to the annual uplift of £500 in the 2016 determination being applied. And yesterday, the Assembly was notified that the Assembly Members' Independent Remuneration Board Bill received royal assent, and a recruitment process for board members is currently taking place. As the Assembly Commission must have sufficient budget to meet the financial requirements of whatever decisions the board takes, if the board makes any increase to the levels of salary payable, this will be notified to the Department of Finance at the appropriate time to secure the necessary funding. There's a slight decrease in 27-28 due to the May 27 Assembly election, as a number of office holder salaries are not payable during dissolution and until new office holders are appointed. In addition, salaries payable to members cease following the poll up to and including the date on which members sign the roll of membership. The remainder of members' costs are made up of constituency costs, members' travel and members' other costs. And as I work through the figures, you will note that there are some anomalies in 27-28 because of the election. So for example, former members can avail of allowances for a 3-month period to wind up their Assembly business, including for office running costs and for office salaries and associated statutory redundancy payments. Members also receive a resettlement allowance if they leave the Assembly at this time. In addition, some allowances such as start-up and maintenance costs and allowances for security measures are available to members over the course of a mandate rather than annually. And, as might be expected, members tend to spend more on office start-up and maintenance costs, setting up their offices and installing security measures after an election than they do in the intervening years, and this has been reflected in the 27-28 budget. If I now move on to constituency costs. So constituency costs covers all of the costs associated with running a member's office, including day-to-day running costs, rent, rates, support staff salaries and winding up costs. It other includes costs associated with starting up and maintaining constituency offices. And other than the anomalies I've already mentioned in relation to the election, the increases are due to the budgeted pay awards for member support staff, along with annual inflationary increases for constituency office operating costs. Members' travel costs likewise provide for an annual inflationary increase, offset by a small saving in 27-28 as the allowances are paused during dissolution. Members' other costs include provision for items such as security measures, disability costs, ill health retirement and resettlement allowance. And the spike in 27-28 is due to the election, through higher spending on security measures as members install security measures in their offices and homes and purchase lone working devices for themselves and their support staff following the election, and also due to the resettlement allowances to members who do not stand at the election or are not re-elected. The next category are payments to parties under the Financial Assistance for Political Parties Scheme 2024, or Party Allowance, and that provides for an inflationary increase each year. Staff salaries relate to the salary costs for Assembly Commission staff. So the budget provides for annual pay awards along with a small number of new posts. Even with the new posts, the ratio of Assembly Commission staff to elected representatives remains lower than the Scottish Parliament and considerably lower than the Senate. Some of the new posts are to support the implementation of the Assembly Commission's new public engagement strategy and to respond to the increasing demand to support a greater range of hosted events and private tours in Parliament buildings. The Assembly Commission is also considering how public accessibility to Parliament buildings could be increased, potentially by facilitating opening at the weekend. Other posts are required to deliver an ambitious modernisation and business improvement programme, including and replacing updating a number of corporate systems, and to support strategic planning and project delivery. A further temporary post has been budgeted for 1 year as part of the Strengthening Scrutiny of Delegated Legislation project to provide for improved tracking and publication of information about the Assembly's scrutiny of delegated legislation, and this is pending the development of an electronic tracker. The 25-26 salaries budget includes a vacancy factor of 5%, but as the majority of posts have now been filled, the vacancy factor has therefore been reduced to 0.5%. And if I now move to administration costs. So administration costs cover a wide range of expenditure items, including committee travel and expenses, building costs, rates, utilities, third-party costs for supporting business-critical IT systems, and recurring contractual costs for things like broadcasting, cleaning and catering. The fluctuation in budget is mainly due to a change in the timing of roof remediation works and the project to modernise and replace the Assembly's corporate systems, which were initially budgeted in earlier years. And that's along with an increase in IT support costs as the Assembly Commission's IT infrastructure is modernised. The surplus budgets in prior years in respect of these projects was returned. Construction Procurement Delivery, or CPD, is overseeing the roof remediation works on behalf of the Assembly Commission and has recommended that it be taken forward in 2 phases. A number of delays in the project, including legal challenges regarding the appropriate DOF framework, the time taken to install scaffolding and undertake investigatory and scoping work, and to prepare tender documents, etc., has meant that it's not been possible to commence this work. The budget anticipates that Phase 1 will be completed in the current financial year, although information I received yesterday suggests that some of this may now continue into 26-27. The budget anticipates that Phase 2 will then commence in 26-27 and complete in 27-28, although the exact time frame and cost will be subject to final scoping and tender. Historically, there's been a significant underinvestment in corporate IT systems and IT infrastructure in the Assembly Commission. And major projects are therefore ongoing to modernise and replace corporate systems and update the IT infrastructure to ensure that the Assembly is appropriately supported and that the network is secure from the increasing risk of cyber threat. The project on the corporate systems review was paused last year following non-delivery of the design phase by the supplier. So this project will commence again in 26-27 once a number of options are considered by the project board, with completion anticipated now in 28-29. Depreciation and impairment charges are based on capital additions in prior years and also an inflationary increase on the valuation of Parliament buildings. And if I now turn to capital investment. So the Assembly Commission has identified a range of capital projects that require investment over the next 4 years, focused mainly on IT security and modernisation and the security, accessibility and maintenance of Parliament buildings. The IT modernisation project will also provide the Assembly Commission with a new website, content management system and electronic records and document management system. Building projects include the refreshment of Parliament building security measures, replacement of east and west security huts, works arising from physical condition and Disability Discrimination Act surveys, and refurbishment of the Long Gallery, Members' Lounge, education rooms, corridor flooring and bathrooms. And finally, Chair, before I finish, I wish to record my thanks once again to Assembly Commission staff. In what has been another extremely busy and challenging year, staff have continued to demonstrate their hard work, dedication and professionalism to support the Assembly and its committees with all of their requirements. And I wish therefore to record my sincere thanks to all of the Assembly staff for the truly excellent work that they do day in and day out to support the Assembly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Leslie, and I'm sure the committee would concur with your remarks about the Assembly staff. I mean, this place just wouldn't function from the canteen to whatever. It's really important, and we absolutely concur with your remarks regarding the staff. We're fighting the clock a little bit, so I'm not going to ask any questions, but I would ask members and maybe the delegation to be succinct going forward. Maybe we can catch up a bit on time. So, no questions?
I ask one
question?
question.
Go ahead.
It's one thing that wasn't mentioned was around sort of the impact of net zero sort of agenda on the building, and in terms of I think there was some reporting earlier in the year around the spiralling cost of energy in the building. In terms of resourcing to try and address some of that and deal with the energy efficiency and energy costs, is that in the mix here at all, in terms of your forward planning?
We do. So we have a number of measures that we've been doing to try and reduce energy efficiency and from a sustainability point of view. So over the last few years, we've been replacing a lot of the light fittings and the lights. We've been replacing devices. We've been putting automatic switch on of lights and so on. We've been monitoring our energy costs on a regular basis to try and see how we can sustain those, monitoring the temperature in the building. And really everything that we do take that into account and look for opportunities to save energy and from a sustainability point of view as far as possible. Obviously, once you get some of those quicker wins out of the way, it becomes more difficult. But there are projects, for example, some of the external lighting is due to be replaced. And again, once we replace that lighting, we'll be putting more energy efficient bulbs in for that. So we do constantly look for every opportunity that we do have to make energy efficiency savings where possible.
The biggest cost is going to be heating the building, I assume.
It
I mean,
is.
what is there enough sufficient resource to address that? Because I think that was really where the reporting was around, that those costs are really rising exponentially.
They are. I mean, obviously Parliament Buildings is a very large building, and obviously the age and construction of the building makes it more difficult to heat in particular, and it's not a modern building, so therefore we are constrained by what we do, but certainly we do monitor the cost that we spend on heating and lighting on an annual basis and constantly look for ways to see if we can reduce those.
Okay, thanks, Nick. John, the floor is yours.
Yeah, a very brief question before I ask it. Chair, I want to thank Leslie and Paula for being here, for the information provided in detail, and also echo the comments around the thanks to the Assembly Commission staff in all business areas for their help and support. The figures provided for the period of the election, with their fluctuations and increases, I take it all of that is based on previous times when some indicator of how much is going to be required what was given, and hasn't changed much over the years, I expect. So I realise that would be hard to predict exactly, but previous patterns, I take it, are the template.
It's obviously until the election happens, we don't know what the turnover in members and so on will be. So therefore, we really look at what has happened historically and make a best assumption on how that may work going forward. But until obviously the election happens, then we really have no idea what the turnover in members and the associated costs will be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Gemma, do you have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Leslie, for the your presentation, and as I say, just to echo again our appreciation of everybody in this building. It keeps it ticking over. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and the staff will very much appreciate that. Thank you.
So members, just thanks very much for your help there in trying to pull back a little bit of time. Appreciate that. So are the members content with the Commission budget proposal, subject to receiving the views of the Department of Finance?
Yep.
Content. Okay, we'll swiftly move to the next item of business, which is item 9 on the agenda, correspondence, and refer members to the correspondence table at page 399. And advise members that items 1 and 5 on the correspondence table are from members of the public and relate to NIPSO's service standards and handling of their complaints. The proposed approach in the correspondence memo recognises the need to protect the vital independence of NIPSO. So can I seek agreement of the committee to action the correspondence received as suggested on the correspondence table? We content? Okay. Moving to the next item of business, which is item 10, committee draft response on the Fiscal Council Bill. I refer members to the following documents: the Secretariat briefing paper at page 438, the draft response to the Clerk to the Committee for Finance at page 441, Annex A, correspondence from the Clerk to the Committee for Finance at page 445, Annex B1, the Hansard from Fiscal Council Bill second stage debate at page 446, Annex B2, and the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill at page 531, Annex C, and the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill EFM at page 551, Annex D. So I'll just invite the Clerk at this point to speak to this particular agenda item. Thank you.
Members, you may recall at your last meeting on 25th of June that the Committee for Finance had requested the Audit Committee's views in general on the Fiscal Council Bill by the 9th of October. Subsequent to that meeting, that bill also had its second stage debate in the Chamber, and some of the contributions in the debates suggested the potential for a role for the Audit Committee in relation to the Fiscal Council. So the purpose of this paper is to seek agreement that I issue some correspondence to the Clerk of Finance Committee, and also to seek your views on a potential draft response in general on the bill. So the draft reply, which is in meeting packs, basically sets out the current roles and responsibilities of the Audit Committee in relation to NIAO, NIPSO and NIAC. You'll note that without expressing opinion on whether the Audit Committee should have a role, I've just said in the correspondence that the Audit Committee's membership and quorum and frequency of meetings at the moment would need potentially to be taken into account if the Finance Committee was minded to seek to amend the bill so that the Audit Committee did have a role. But at this point, the Clerk to the Finance Committee is just seeking information on the current role of the Audit Committee, so it's to seek comments and agreement for that piece of correspondence to go off to the Finance Committee Clerk. And then secondly, you'll note in the pack at it's paragraph 5A of my paper, I set out some potential lines for the basis of a draft for a committee response on the Fiscal Council. So it could be drafted along, and I would bring back the draft at a future meeting, but the draft could discuss Audit Committee supporting the placing of the Fiscal Council on a statutory footing as a body corporate. It could note the placing of it on a statutory footing is in line with best practice, international best practice on fiscal institutions. It could look at whether or not the committee welcomes the bill that it provides the council with a very broad and flexible remit. That'll be for the council to determine its own work programme. It could discuss whether or not the audit committee is supportive of the intention to future-proof the bill, given that the role of the fiscal council is expected to expand in time. Potentially could reflect the importance of ensuring the independence of the fiscal council is maintained if its role changes. And also, of course, any committee views on any proposal for the audit committee to have a role in relation to the fiscal council. So that is it in terms of my briefing, Chair.
Thanks, Ashley. Anybody any questions for the clerk? No? Okay. A couple of things. I need to seek agreement of the committee to issue the draft correspondence to the clerk to the Committee for Finance at Annex A, page 441, which sets out the role of the Audit Committee in relation to NIAO, NIPSO and NIAC. Are we agreed? Yep. And if members are content, seek agreement for the clerk to draft a committee response to the bill which incorporates the points made in paragraph 5 at page 439. Are we content? Thank you. And just to ask members if there are any further points it wishes the clerk to reflect in the draft response to the bill. No? Okay. So advise members that the draft will be provided to the Audit Committee for consideration at its meeting on the 1st of October. So we're moving to the next item of business, and the committee will be going into closed session. I need to seek the agreement of the committee